Our day started by getting our son ready for school, getting into the school bus, and then stopping by the Abbotsford airport and meeting a friend from France and giving her a hug. And she's actually, her name is Sandra Gage, and she's the co-writer of the song Today. And she was passing through, and we literally had 15 minutes with her at the airport, and then I had to get back to this.
Man, you've like already had a full day. I just barely got my head off the pillow. So I've had a super full weekend because we just moved our house, and I realized I have way more stuff than I ever thought I had. So, we filled and overfilled a moving truck, and then, our home is just in boxes and chaos. So this morning I drove out of our messy house, and I'm at my parents' house, which is nice and calm and quiet and organized and clean because they're down in Mexico. Oh, no, they're down in Palm Springs, and in fact listening in to you and I talking this morning. So I'm pacing around their kitchen as I'm talking to you. Very glad to be in an organized, clean house.
Yeah, isn't that, that's always such a good thing, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, totally. Well, for those of you who are listening in, you might not know Brian and I are actually only about 20, 25 minutes apart. We both are up in what's called the Fraser Valley of British Columbia. And Brian has lived here for a long time, except for a few years, I guess, when you were in the UK. And I've grown up here basically all my life, except for a few years when I was in Ottawa. And Brian, you have just a great kind of, I call it a home, but it's almost like a retreat. A refuge. I love it when homes kind of take their shape like that. And in fact, why don't we talk a little bit about that, about how you have shaped your home to be a refuge for your family, for your ministry. You have some unique dynamics going on in your family. So since my home is in total chaos right now, why don't you give me a vision of where it could go and how I could create a refuge out of that. So why don't you give me a little bit of a story of that, of where that's gone, and maybe take me back to the first years when you lived in Langley, just 10 minutes from where I am right now, and then you had to move out of that place and kind of relocate, and it's a great story, so I'd love to hear about that.
Well, I mean, I'm literally sitting talking to you right now in our dining room, which used to be, when I was a little boy, it was the living room of this little 1930 farmhouse on 5 acres near the Abbotsford airport. And my parents bought this place in 1970.
Yeah.
And, when you talk about a home and a refuge and a place, I think one of the big parts of that actually is hospitality. And it's funny, like I was just reflecting this morning how my mom in this very home, she used to, some of the people, I was constantly, bringing people over, musicians, street people that we were sharing the love of God with on the streets.
Wow.
And my mom would just constantly just welcome them, love on them, feed them, sometimes mend their clothes if their clothes needed mending, and bless them as they went on their way. And then my wife has done that so much over the years. We have 6 children, including several with special needs. So their friends, and it's just this sense of hospitality. So I think, and she's a great organizer. So, me as the creative kind of visionary, it's fantastic to be in a loving, organized, hospitable home, and I'm so blessed to, and also being for us, it's it's in a place of roots too. So I grew up here and then got married at 19, moved away, not far away, to the booming town of Langley, where I was the young worship pastor at the Langley Vineyard, and the early songs like I Lift My Eyes Up and Faithful One and Refiner's Fire came out of that season.
Yeah.
And and then we tried to launch a musical called Father's House, and it went really well, and then utterly collapsed, and lost our house that we were living in Langley because we had tried to keep the musical alive by selling it, putting the equity in. It wasn't enough, and then we were offered a job in London, England, and so 2.5 years in London, which is another story. Maybe we'll get to that part at some point too, where the Hungry album came out, Come Now's the Time. And then we got this little phone call from my parents one day, a couple of years into our time in London, the family home and 5 acres is too much for us. We're heading into our retirement year, so we're going to sell it unless you want it. And so that was kind of the first spark that pulled us back to Canada and to the West Coast here, and we've been back here for 14 years, and I've raised my children in the same home I was raised in, and there's the stability there, and a sanctuary that's here that is very palatable. It's people, strangers. We've filmed an interview here, and we've had a TV crew show up, and then the TV guy, the camera operator, leaving, and he turns to me and he goes, "What is it about this place? I just experienced such a peace here."
Yeah.
So
totally. I was seeing on the screen one of the images, and maybe Natasha, you can go back to that, where you have the fireplace, because that's a real special room that the artist, designer, when I think of an artist, not just music, but designing a space and, a refuge place, a place where, creativity can happen. And so tell me about this space, because this is actually part of your home over your garage. And it's just, just looking at it, it's just awesome. So tell us about that in particular.
Well, that's called the Shining Rose. At least that's my name for it. And what you can't see in this picture is exactly opposite the fireplace, above the entrance door, and the top is a circular oval stained glass window with a rose. And growing roses is my hobby and my love, and I think roses are like a picture of worship and life. They're fragrant, but there are thorns. And so that's the name of this place. And when we moved back from England, there was an old shed on the property, and in order to make room for our 6 children, we had to convert the garage on the property into another bedroom. So, and we had this old tool shed that was there, and we couldn't really park our cars in it. So we decided, well, let's build a new garage, separate from the house, but right beside the house. And why don't we, when we're vaulting the ceiling above the garage, why don't we just make it into a music room? And of course, it escalates. but the goal was to create a multi-use space that was acoustically designed and a beautiful, inviting space to pray in, to worship in, to make music in, to record in. It functions in lots of different ways. People have been married, we've had like a few weddings in here for small, like 50-person weddings. We can squeeze in there. So but it's like a little chapel, little sanctuary on our property that is been filled with a lot of music.
Yeah, the reason why I wanted you to tell about that, because it's so much. I'm just very much like that I've got to have a space that sort of breathes peace and is a refuge. And even as we're in our new home right now, the first thing that I was doing was ripping out that kind of white fireplace thing. I went and bought a nice piece of wood for a mantle and getting the rocks and, you know, even kind of inspired by the image I'm seeing there, just kind of creating that ambiance. And it's part of how God made me and maybe lots of people who are kind of artistic who are listening.
Yeah, let me tell you one other fun story. You're looking at Callum on the drum kit there, and you see those kind of some of those strange rocks right behind him. One day we came while it was in process with the guy who was making the fireplace, and he had this pile of the rocks, and they looked like the reject rocks. Like if you look on the top of the fireplace, there's all of these smooth, really classic river rocks, and they all come from rivers here in British Columbia. But on the bottom are like some almost like mangled rocks, multicolored, different, and you can't quite see it, but there was this pile of rocks, so my wife Joyce asks the fireman, "Oh, those are the rocks you're getting rid of?" And he looks up at her with this little twinkle in his eye. You'll see. I have something special in mind. And then about 2 weeks later, she comes back into there and she goes, "Oh." She realizes that the rocks that she thought were the reject rocks were the special featured rock right in the main base of the fireplace. And I don't know, it was one of those, as this fireplace, old school, kind of old, crotchety, funny, warm guy who just makes fireplaces, and very few people do this anymore, out of real stone. You know, he had a plan for those stones that didn't quite fit in the classic river rock. He was going to feature them, you know.
Nice. Just while we're continuing to look at the picture, can you tell me who are some of the people in there? I see a few faces I recognize, and I think these people have been a special part of your long-term ministry. So why don't you just tell us who they are?
Yeah, that's Brian Thiessen on the far right with the dark blue shirt, and Brian and I have been friends since we were 5 years old and making music together since we were about 15. Amazing songwriter, guitarist, producer, engineer, singer, everything. And in the center there is Callum Reese on the drums. We've been, the first time was the late 90s when we were in England. He was born in Wales but grew up in London. And his funny little thing, his dad was the drummer for AC/DC for about 10 years.
Wow.
His dad played with many of the rock great. He started his career with Tom Jones. Elvis apparently tried to steal him away from Tom Jones. And anyway, so Chris Slade is his name, and this is his son Callum, who I always say Callum is like his dad in some ways and very unlike, you know, his dad. If you see the Thunderstruck video of AC/DC, he looks like just this nasty, bald, like monster drummer on the stage. Right? Just exuding anger and angst. And whenever people see Callum play drums, he's smiling, he's kind of laughing, he's drawing people in. He's And then the gal on the top left corner is Teresa Trask, and she is a longtime friend of my wife and myself. She runs a charity for women in addiction recovery here in Abbotsford, and is an amazing singer-songwriter, and is part of our new band, the Sheer Poets, and there's me.
Oh, that's you. Okay, there you go. That's great. The family music photo. Such a great environment. Well, I wanted to just share a little bit for those of you listening, a bit of my connection to you, and I think I may have shared this with you a few times, Brian, but I just feel a great sense of privilege and honor to have you here and to let you know how significant your songs and your ministry have been to me, particularly when I would kind of merge my life back to those early years when you were at the Langley Vineyard, and I didn't know you, I didn't know your face, I'd never seen you, but I think it was probably 1991 or 92, I stumbled across this, one of the very early Langley Vineyard albums, And I had actually, in my parents' house, they had a little basement, and I built this refuge for myself. I turned this little 12 by 12 room into what looked like the inside of a log cabin. I had one wall that was all like a mural with a waterfall, and and it kind of had a porch deck kind of thing on it, and then I had all these old artifacts from my grandfather's farm in the Sumas prairies, like old lanterns and saws and guns, and so it was like that was my refuge. And then I built this stereo system, and I remember turning the lights down. I get them all just faded to the right level, and then I take my sound system. CDs were just barely coming out at the time, and I'd play your songs, and it would just fill the room, and it was in the darkness, and my hands would be in the air, and I just I'd never heard music like this before. Before that it was, and no disrespect to other songs, but it was like we were singing "This is the day, this is the day," and all those kinds of songs that were sort of happy. I don't know, the songs of the 80s, call it that. But something was shifting then, and so those songs like "I Lift My Eyes Up" and then what was that, "Eternity"? Man, some of those songs were just so significant in shaping my heart. And then as the years went on, "Refiner's Fire" and all of that, and I just kind of decided, you know what, I want to give my life to this. I love this music. I love the heart, the rhythm. I love what it's all about, and I didn't know really where I was heading as far as what I was going to do with it all. And so eventually I became a worship pastor, and then went into this kind of praise charts world. So anyways, I just kind of wanted to say thank you. We all have different stories of things that have influenced and impacted us, and I'm especially amazed that some of the songs that you talk about and the seasons that you wrote those songs in, like for example the Father's Heart musical that actually fell apart, and some of those songs were shaping in me this kind of theme of adoption and my own sense of being a father, my sense of being a son to my dad, and to God so much more. I mean, it's been totally impacting as far as how I see myself, and again, that kind of came from all of those seasons. So I think that's what I'd like for you to take us through, because especially what's significant in your story is how God is shaping us through the challenging seasons, and that we embrace those and sing those experiences, the fullness. That's what the whole psalmic experience is that you're going to be sharing with us in your whole new band is about, not just singing the happy songs, but all of the songs, all of the experiences. So there's so much to go in there, but I feel like I want you to just walk us again a bit through some of the journey that you've been through, and maybe it can set a bit of a backdrop to some songs that were like, oh, I didn't realize that's where that song came from. So yeah, can you find a place to land this plane somewheres, back in the 90s, and take us on a bit of a journey through where this has gone?
Well, you said an expression there, singing our experiences, like and out of our experiences we need to sing, not just the content of our experiences, but the faith that threads through all the different types of experiences, the way in which we hang on to God and to faith and to community and to each other. And something happens when you take words and a concept and you add melody and a musical setting to those set of words that enters our hearts, our minds, our spirits, and our memories in a way that is not accessible by words or text on a page alone. Wow. I mean, let maybe start here. It would have been fall 1997. Out of the aftermath of the collapse of the musical in '96, I was offered a job in the UK and Ireland, training songwriters and worship leaders in the vineyard movements and friends of those churches. So there was about 100-ish churches there that my job was to try and help, encourage, and train. Anyway, I'm walking on the streets of London one morning, and I'm pretty low. Like, I'm thinking, man, how did I not see that coming? I.e. the collapse of the musical, and
yes,
and I thought God was in this. I took a step of faith, and it's almost like felt like as soon as I took the step of faith, everything disintegrated. And at that point, we had just found out that we had 4 girls and 4 girls and 1 son. At that point, we found out our son had a condition called Fragile X syndrome and would require care for the rest of his life. So there was family challenges. There was ministry/career challenges, and I'm walking the streets of London, and I have this experience. That so many of these times in the midst of our life, we don't choose the timing of God's initiative towards us. We can prepare ourselves, and but I think somehow God knows when the right time is, and it was at this time when I was about my lowest. I hear in the atmosphere crackling around me while I'm walking the streets of London, "Come, now is the time to worship." And one of the first thoughts in my head is, now? Now? I'm a mess. I'm out of my comfort zone. I'm literally living in a country where I've just arrived and I barely know a soul, and my family's in this huge transition now.
Yes.
And it just kept on coming, this line, and the sense. All of a sudden, I go, oh, I'm tuning into something. Psalm 19 talks about this. That the heavens are this call is going out night and day, and so I got back to the house and ran up to the upper floor of the house, where it's just a little cheap electric piano sitting there, and I start plunking out the notes, do 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 do, trying to remember it. I didn't have anything to record the idea, and I knew the time was ticking. I had about another 10 minutes, and I had to walk my children to school and then walk to work, and I love that walking culture there in the UK. And so I'm taking a photographic. I'm trying to, in my mind, picture myself playing the notes and remembering what they are. And then in the coming days, I wrote the song, and that's why I wrote words like "Come just as you are." Right. It wasn't like "Come, bring him your best with glorious praise." It was kind of like, it was coming more from a sense of brokenness and honesty. And yet still the call remains, whether we're broken, whether we're feeling on top of the world or the bottom of the world, it's always time to come before our God and give him our heart again and surrender and acknowledge who he is. So so that was part of what was going on behind that song. And some of the stories I've heard about that song is just crazy. An ethnomusicologist was studying culture and music in Iran, and they go to a little village in Iran, and these people pull out, with their grin and stuff, and they literally start playing, singing in their own native tongue, "Come Now Is the Time to Worship." Places like in the most far reaches of the world, somehow that song has traveled, and what's really cool about that is I've always had a heart and a vision for people worshiping in their musical and cultural mother tongue, like in a way that's who they are, like when that, come just as you are. It's not just about in good times and bad times. It's also come just as you are. Like, what is our heart language? And we can express worship out of that.
Yeah. Wow.
So,
okay, I have a question to ask. I'm just thinking this, and I'm hoping this isn't offensive, but this is what I'm thinking. "Come Now Is the Time to Worship" and "Refiner's Fire." There's a couple of songs like that are just huge songs that you didn't try to make these. I'm calling them massive songs, world reaching kinds of songs. And I think it's been a few years since you've written a song that's had that kind of reach and impact. So I guess what I'm wanting to ask is, what's that like to have written songs like that, and then to think, now what? Like, can I do it again? Can I repeat that? Can I fabricate that? Do I need to go to another country to get another song? I'm just wondering, what's it like to sort of follow on the heels of something unexpected that God does through you in a season like that?
Right. Well, Ryan, that's a fantastic question, and it's a good, honest question to ask, because I think, every creative person in every type of expression struggles with that, when it's kind of like when everything comes together and it works on every angle, and then it just connects with people. What do you do next? Well, you do the next thing. You create the next thing that is genuine. And I know in some of the dialogue with publishers, sometimes the unspoken thing is, "Brian, can't you write 'Come Now Is the Time to Worship' too? Can't you write the sequel?" And you simply you simply cannot. What you can do is keep living, keep serving, keep listening, and then write the next thing, knowing that, and I knew as soon as that one happened, the response to it happened all over the world. I knew that, 99% chance I would never have another song that I would write or be a part of that would have that kind of reach and resonance around the world.
Right.
But I get just as much joy creating the songs that I'm writing now as writing that song. The different and the process is the same. I write it, I experience God in the writing of it. I experience when you're a creative person, that's how you encounter. But then you offer it up, and you have no control over what's going to happen with it next. And we all, as writers, we all probably become known for, certain songs. People probably like Paul Baloche would be "Open the Eyes of My Heart."
Right.
And the thing is, I don't know if you ask Paul or me, you can even believe that some of your more recent songs are quote unquote better songs. Like they have, I was in Dubai, actually. No, was it Sri Lanka? I was in one of these far-flung places doing an event, and I sang "Come Now Is the Time," and then I sang one of my new songs, and a guy comes up to me and goes, "Oh, it was great to hear that old song, that Come song that everybody knows you for, but that new song, that was amazing. And it's a better song, and there's part of your writer goes, yes, okay, I and yet nothing really happens with that song, right? And so you realize there's so many other factors, and so all we can do is just walk in humility and say, we're just going to try and be faithful, try and do the next thing. But sometimes, on low days, as you see that what was once a popular song starting to ebb away and start to not be sung as much, you can start thinking like, okay, well, do I need to look for, do I need to look for another career or another, do I need to completely reinvent myself? So yeah, there's all of that. We're normal human beings, like
Yeah.
Good question.
I always just appreciate. Thank you for taking that. Because I don't know. I respect so much about your whole life, and I don't think it's all about writing the big songs, but there is a humanity that you must go through, in the seasons of life that you've been in. So now I'd like to take about the next 10 minutes or so to talk about the fresh new thing that God's birthing in you with the Sheer Poet Society. And then for those of you who are listening, I'm telling you the question and answer time is probably going to be the best, 20, 25 minutes we have in this webinar. And people are already flooding in the questions. So please send them to us, and we'll try to get through as many as possible in the last 15 or 20 minutes of our time. But I want to encourage you to write them. You can write them anytime in that Ask a Question button, and then we'll try and get to some of those. So while people are kind of doing that and listening in, let's kind of go into the new season that you're in now, the Sheer Poet Society. So take us there. Tell us where this was birthed from, and it's been already a number of years in the works, and it's still not really, to the surface yet. So tell us.
Well, we are called the Sheer Poets, and what happened was, a quick backstory was in about 2010, I went through a very deep crisis of painful church conflict, and a number of things converged at the same time, and the simple summary is that I lost my words. I almost completely lost my connection with an ability to sing modern worship songs. I lost my connection to be able to write worship songs for sure. And this went on for a long time, for a couple of years, all the rest of 2010, all of 2011, and we were coming up at about 2012. I was asked to preach a message on the Psalms, to pick a psalm, preach a message on it. So I chose Psalm 1, and we were going to start a series on the Psalms at our church. And, it's kind of like the late 90s, when I described the background with Come Now is the Time to Worship. I was kind of in a fresh way barely hanging on to my faith after some very painful things. And so I prepped this message on Psalm 1, which Psalm 1 irked me a little bit because it's this psalm of certainty and orientation and black and white, Anyway, so I'm prepping it, trying to be obedient, prepping it, and I get to Friday, and this little thought goes off into my head. If you don't sing it, they won't remember a word. And I'm like, but I don't write songs anymore. This is 2 years ago. I don't write songs anymore. I'm done with that. This thought goes off in my head again. If you don't sing it, they won't remember it. So, okay. So I set Psalm 1. I take the words of Psalm 1, paraphrase it a bit, and I sing it, and I include that in my message. And then I set Psalm 2 because I enjoyed the experience of singing Psalm 1, so I sing Psalm 2, which is an incredible psalm about the nations raging and kissing the sun and all of these images. And then I said, well, this is interesting. This is life-giving. I'm going to keep going. So I set Psalm 3. And when I hit Psalm 3, the floodgate of tears opened up. And some of it was the backstory. David is hiding in a cave. His son is hunting him down to kill him. And I can all of a sudden relate being pursued by a man who wants ill for me. And And that set me on a journey. So then I just started singing my way through the Psalter, singing my way through the Psalms, and I sat about the first 15, and then I realized I don't want to do this on my own. And if I do this on my own, they're going to start sounding too much the same. So the four of us formed the Sheer Poets, Brian Thiessen, Callum Reese, Teresa Trask, and myself, and we started co-writing, creating settings for each psalm. There you've got a picture of the four of us. And we are having an absolute blast, and we are not censoring out the difficult bits. We're singing our anguish and our anger and our praise. So you'll have like Psalm 6 is this incredible song of anguish, and Psalm 8 is this incredible song of joy, and we have Watoto, African Children's Choir, singing with us about from the mouths of children you have ordained praise. And we have these African children singing with us. And, like Psalm 10 is this cry for justice. Why do you stand so far away on this troubled day? And it's honest. So and for me, it's just like I kind of go, singing the Psalms is so vital and important. It's the songbook that is the foundation of all people of faith for thousands of years. And let me just share something quick that N.T. Wright said about the Psalms. He says the Psalms are designed as multidimensional worship in which every aspect of human life, love, fear, delight, anger, despair, gratitude, is laid as an offering before the God who himself comes to stand at the crossroads of time, space, and matter. And then he says this is so important. He says, the Psalms might not always seem to us particularly pure or worthy, as sacrifices should be. But I think part of the point is that they are truthful, that sincere outpourings of who and what the worshiper actually is. And when we worship the Creator God with our whole truthful self, we trust. And the Psalms strongly encourage this trust that we will be remade. And so it's this kind of, truthfulness to the Psalms, truthfulness, of course, of who God is, but truthfulness of who we are in all of those ebbs and flows. And you can, knowing some of my story and some of the struggles and joys, you kind of go, okay. And I'm thinking, maybe there's other people in the world that have struggled and have gone through anguish and anger, not just praise and gratitude, that need to express it. And so that's the journey we started on, and we are almost there with our first debut album, which is Psalm 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And then if people get the deluxe version, we've got a song from the Dead Sea Scrolls on bereavement and grief and praise in the middle of grief, called The Bereavement, which is from the Dead Sea Scrolls, Cave 1. And then we've got a setting of Psalm 30 as well, which is kind of like the whole Psalter in micro. So
I'm just I'm imagining when I think about the Psalms that you might have to break apart from the traditional 3-minute song, verse, chorus, verse, chorus, chorus, bridge, tag. So tell me a little about the musicality, the freedoms, maybe some of the challenges. Like, I'm just thinking, what are you going to do with Psalm 119? You must already be sweating at night thinking about how you're going to write a massive, 20-part concerto, or will it be a summary of it, or what?
Maybe a bit of both. I mean, right now what we're doing is we're facing the first 25. We said we are going to set the first 25, record them, release them, and then reevaluate. But you talk about song form and song structure. It's been so fun and liberating to do some songs that don't fit into the classic verse, chorus, bridge structure. I would describe some of our music as kind of like, it's a little bit more theatrical. Some who have heard my musical project, Prodigal God, that music, they go, oh, when they hear that you're poets, they say it's kind of like your more theatrical stuff hybrid with your worship stuff. Some of it actually includes very clear refrains that people can sing.
Yeah.
And there's some of the psalms, of course, aren't that long, and then some of them have more like 5 or 6 totally distinct musical sections. But they're still approachable and singable, and I think once you've listened to them a few times, our hope is that, and we know this is going to happen, is people will start memorizing Scripture without even trying, because we sing the entire psalm, and we use different translations. Plus, we use Robert Alter's his poetic Book of Psalms translation, along with the NIV and the other translations, and we merge those together for each psalm and try and make it as poetic and singable and as accessible to our modern culture as possible, yet still staying true to the ancient Hebrew poetry upon which it's based. So yeah,
are you saying you're not writing just a summary of the psalm, that you're really trying to take each verse, or like what level of freedoms are you having as far as, if there's 37 verses, is that how long you're trying to write the song? Or
we are, put it this way, our songs range of our first batch, our songs range in length from about 3.5 minutes to 8 minutes.
Yeah.
Okay. So there's a quite a range there. In some of the very long psalms, we will go for some sense of summary. Like we'll take a cluster of 4 to 6 verses that are on a certain, because there's a lot of repetition too, and a lot of parallelism. Hebrew poetry was built on, you state something, and then you state it again from a slightly different angle. And sometimes people make huge theological observations about that, but that's actually just more about poetry, right?
Yeah.
You're writing in a rhythm. There's a rhythm to the words. There's a sound to the words. The theology is more revealed in the overall narrative arc, the overall content of what's actually happening. Mm-hmm. So yeah, we do some summary, but people will have to find out what we do with it.
Yeah.
And our hope is that we inspire other people to re-enter the world of the Psalms and maybe even do their own versions.
Yeah. One of the challenges I have with this webinar format is I can't play any audio, but I have some people who are like itching to hear just a little taste of what some of these lines might sound like. So could you, I don't know if you have a guitar around you or if you want to just sing a couple of lines just to give us a sense of, sometimes we have people do this and, it's just raw and whatever, but go for it, Brian. Give us a little taste of something.
Oh, boy.
I'm totally putting you on the spot. So go ahead. You pick a couple lines or something, and just so we can sort of see what it flows like.
Psalm 6 starts with, Lord, don't rebuke me, or in your wrath turn away.
Right.
Have mercy on me, Lord. In your anger, don't chasten me without cause. Your favor is my need, Lord. And actually, you can go to our website and you can actually get the full recorded version of that song, a setting of Psalm 6 for free just by signing up. It's just thesheerpoets.com.
Right. Natasha, you should put on the screen how to spell sheer, because it's definitely not S-H-E-E-R.
Yeah, though, we actually bought the S-H-E-E-R poets.com website too, so it'll redirect you. But yeah, sheer is a Hebrew word which means musical sheer. You should really roll R.
Okay. Like a pirate.
Sheer. Yeah, exactly. Now all of a sudden we're wearing, that's hilarious. we're wearing.
It's not the sheer pirates. It's the sheer poets.
Yeah, we are the sheer. But it's also based on that English expression, that sheer poetry, right? So it was that's true poetry.
Just one more request, if I could. I think it was Psalm 3. Is that where it goes? Da 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 da. What's that melody? That's the one that's kind of sticking in my head. And, is it Psalm 3? I think it is. Can you remember it?
Could be, yes. I'm just drawing a blank here. Like, which part? I'm trying to think, which part of Psalm 3 are you referring to?
I thought it was the beginning of the song. It was the beginning of the song that it started.
Oh, yeah. Oh, Lord, I have so many enemies.
Oh, that
They
one.
rise against me. They rise against me. That one?
Yes.
I call, and then the chorus goes, I call to you and you answer.
Yeah.
This one actually has like a classic modern worship chorus.
Yes.
I call to you and you answer, providing from your holy mountain.
Yes.
Because you're watching over me, I will sleep and rise in peace.
Yeah.
And those words, I mean, you think about the original setting of those words, David hiding out in a cave while his son is hunting him down. It's such an incredible testimony to trusting in God. It's just, it moved me to tears. Yeah.
And when I hear those, I just think there's such an incredible power in a melody and a lyric, because that it's so simple. It would only need a guitar and your voice, but somehow it kind of resonates, and I'm like, I can hear it in my head. I know it. And then as soon as you sing it, it just kind of brings it all back. So I think that's it's incredible. Well, let's take some time. There's a few questions coming, and a few more will come as we talk here for the last 15 or 20 minutes. So I'm just going to read them as people write them. Richard is just asking, do you consider the modern worship industry, in quotes, to have lost sight of the core values of musical worship?
Well, I mean, good question, and obviously there are things that concern me, but I definitely wouldn't say that I'm the one qualified to judge whether the industry has lost its way. I think my job is to try and keep my eyes fixed on my Maker and my Savior, and to try and honestly and with integrity express worship out of my life. I mean, I think, and I think there's a time for grand performance. Big, moving events that use choirs and orchestras and lighting and everything. But so much of what we need is actually what Ryan was just talking about, is actual simple and accessible, and sometimes as simple as just somebody grabbing a guitar and say, hey, let's sing this song together to express our hearts to God. And it's not trying to overpower people with our virtuosity, like our brilliance. It's actually saying, hey, can we do this together? Can we sing together? So I don't know exactly what you're referring to, but I have my own, sometimes my own concerns, but then I kind of go, no, I just got to stay the course of what I feel led to do, and I want to, and I don't know. I mean, I think, and we move through seasons too, right? So,
yeah. I'm glad you have that approach. I have to say, I always get a little uneasy when people are too critical of modern worship, as though there was some way to define it with one paint stroke.
Right.
I mean, every song and every worship leader is a person, who is accountable to God, and there's just no way to sweep the whole thing with, well, modern worship is this, or it's that, and so I think it's so important. Even if you're writing the simplest, purest, psalm worship song, and if that comes out of an impure heart or something like that, it's just as bad as the, to performance rock, modern guys. So it's interesting today. Passion is releasing their new album today. We just have released all the songs on Praise Charts, and that's that whole genre of like massive stadium, worship, 80,000 kids singing. I remember last year when they released their album, and I was listening through this one song. I think it was Christy Nockels was singing, and then it all kind of came down to a hush, and I think she just went spontaneously into Refiner's Fire. And I had emailed you, Brian, and I said, hey, did you know that your song showed up in the Passion album? And he's like, you didn't even know. But even those massive stadium, impacting events need to sometimes settle down into that intimate, kind of moment.
Yeah.
So that's a good approach. Okay, another question here. Biff is asking, hi Brian, I'm a traditional worship leader looking to add an acoustic praise ensemble in hopes of attracting young families to our worship. Any advice for us as we make the tradition? I think he meant transition. We want to maintain deep worship and avoid an entertainment vibe. Thanks, love your music. And that's from Biff in Nashville.
Yeah, that's awesome. First of all, the heart of what you've just expressed is so vital and important. The recognition that we stand in a heritage of something, and that the future isn't found by just discarding all of that, and but then and then your description of an acoustic ensemble, like a little, and I think what's happening among young people is a real awakening and respect for acoustic instruments. And what I love about it is you can add some energy and different emotions and stuff to arrangements with acoustic instruments, but then you can set the volume based on the gathering, right? So it's like if it's a gathering of 100 or a gathering of 50 or a gathering of 500, you just augment slightly different with your sound system. But there's an approachableness, and I think you'll find probably with the older generation an ability for them to access some of those new songs done that way, maybe more so than the electric guitar cranking out, U2 style mega delay. You're building a musical bridge to them, and you're saying, we want to do some new things, but we want to do it with you. We want to do it together as community. And I think every worship leader, worship pastor, you've got to trust your pastoral, relational heart and instincts as you size up your situation, that you have to interpret. One of the most important skills I think we as worship leaders have to do is take songs that we think, I think this song is for our body at this season, but just mimicking that recording isn't going to work. You have to then take that song and interpret it in your setting and in the moment. And I hear that in your question too. So that's bang on. I think you're going the right direction.
Ken asks, how do you help create peace, in quotes, and a worshipful atmosphere when the praise band is worried about their performance and concerned with their individual need not to stand out or draw attention to themselves during worship? Our praise band is very unanimated and tied to their music stands.
Yeah. Well, as you said right there at the end, I always talk about that what we do in public, we need to needs to move us to worship in private. And so I think having the chart, having the music to start with, that's how we learn. And you go through it multiple times, but we need to get to the point where that can be then set aside in the moment, and we can immerse ourselves and lose ourselves in the moment, in the song. And are not we are responding in the moment. Like we enter, and then somehow when that happens, people sense the difference and are drawn in. They don't have to be talked into. They don't have to be coerced in. They just have to be invited in by our example. And then people will experience it together.
Yeah. It's one of the challenges of music and the music stand is you know, I this is a challenge I have is you know, with praise charts and what we do, we're you know, sending all this music out in kind of rather complex arrangements when you have lots of instruments together. But then when you watch a band leading in it, even when I do that, and I know that they're reading from music that we've provided, there's a sense of me that wants them to just somehow get free of the music, you know, and connect with their heart. And so that's the challenge that's before us, is that the music is a means to an end, and that heart connection has to be there somehow at the end. And it can be tempting to just lock in. Maybe it's a nervous reaction. You're up, you're in front of a stage, you're in front of people. I mean, I used to lead worship lots of times, and I didn't want to look at the people because I didn't want to see that they weren't singing or that they didn't like me or all the emotional things going on, and I just find something else to stare at, and then it's easy to just lock into the music stand, right? So that's what I think is coming out of that question a little bit, is somehow as worship pastors, we need to lead our musicians and our bands. I've heard of people sometimes taking videos and then, you know, at worship practice, play the video of your band and let them see themselves. You know how awful it is to see yourself?
Oh, ouch. Like, ouch.
Yeah. But that might be an idea for them to just
it's a great idea.
See that, right? And so
one simple thing that I've done and works great with the PDF charts that you guys send out as praise charts is I've got an iPad adapter on my mic stand, and I have a little foot switch, and so I don't have the big music stand usually anymore. I just have the iPad on my mic stand. And whenever I need to glance at it to reference it, it's there, and then the next page comes along, I just tap my foot and it changes the page, and it's there, but it also looks, the iPad almost disappears into the mic stand, and so there's less of a barrier between me and the people, which is what I like about that.
Yeah. And then, of course, there also is memorizing music, which, you know, I'm sure it's easier for you as an artist if you're, you know, traveling and stuff like that. But lots of churches are moving in that direction where they're trying to intentionally clean the stage, keep a more minimalistic even look. You know, don't have chords everywhere, music stands, but it takes time to internalize the music. But there's tremendous benefit from that. So it's all part of growing as a worship team and deepening musically and spiritually, right? So that's good. Well, we are very naturally just coming to the end of our hour. Interesting, this all kind of started a little bit 3 or 4 weeks ago. Paul Baloche was on the phone with me, and so I had Brian call in, and we kind of surprised Paul, which was kind of fun and had some laughs and stories. And Paul and Brian go back in their ministry years several years ago, so that was fun. And then Brian and I went out for lunch, and we decided, let's do our own time together like this. So this was a really, it's a very natural, flowing, easy time of talking to you, and very heartfelt. So thank you for spending this time with us. And the way I often like to end, and I like to ask if you would just pray for those of us who are listening in, many worship pastors and leaders. We have someone even from the UK listening in this morning, Brian. So all over the world.
Not morning for them.
No. Yeah, but if you could just pray something meaningful over this, and that will kind of close out our time, and then we'll move on with our days. So there you go.
Yeah. So Father, loving Father, the one who calls us by name, thank you that you do. Thank you for who you are, that you are our provision, our protection, and our peace in the storms of life. And we trust that as we express what is in our hearts in our worship, that that you would take delight in our hearts, and that we, in our service and our leadership, would draw others in, that the suffering and those broken among us wouldn't be turned away, but that they would be drawn in, that they would hear their song, even at times their song of pain and anguish that we hear in the laments, that those songs would be heard too, and then together as a family and as a community we would walk in love and trust with each other and with you. So we thank you for the gift of time that we've had to share on this day.
Yes.
Amen.
Amen. Amen. Well, for those of you listening, I just want to encourage you to go to what is the domain again? Is it The Sheer Poets? Is that?
Yeah, thesheerpoets.com, and
okay.
Sheer is just spelled SHIYR, but if you do the English word, it'll get you there too.
Okay, so go there and you can pick up a free download of one of the recordings and see some pictures and things like that. So for those of you who want to just keep up on the ongoing, continuing ministry that Brian's involved in, when do you think Brian will be hearing this album, or it'll come out on iTunes and things like that?
Well, it could come out as early. It could come out as early as June. Shane Wilson, who mixes everybody from Chris Tomlin and many others in Nashville, is mixing it right now, and we're only 2 songs away from the mix being done. And then Hank Williams has agreed to master it in mid to late May. So we're working on designing artwork, and we're working hard, and we're trying to wrap. We've got another about 2.5 weeks in our Indiegogo campaign to try. So if anybody wants to pre-order the album, by doing so, you actually help us fund the album. So if you, there's a picture of our family eating. Fun. If you just go to Indiegogo and just type in The Sheer Poets, it'll take you to our Sheer Poets campaign page, and there's all kinds of options there that you can pre-order and help us. And you, by pre-ordering it, you are our record label instead of getting funded by a label. We're doing this just as a group of artists together.
Well, I hope we can find lots of people from the Praise Charts world to help support you, and I'm sure that we will have the charts and other promotions and things like that. Once the songs come out, we'll make sure we get it in the flow at Praise Charts, and perhaps we can just talk again. Maybe we'll do another webinar of some kind when it comes out, and share with people that it's all available and ready to go. So that's wonderful. Well, thanks, Brian, for your time, and I'll let you on to the rest of your day. And really appreciate this.
You're very welcome.
Okay. Goodbye and God bless.
Bye-bye.